Okay, open your Bible to Genesis chapter 2, verse 9. And I actually, Beverly just said, a part of my theme, and I'm actually speaking about symbols and the symbolic, because the Bible is a symbolic book based on and rooted in symbols. And if we don't understand the symbols, then obviously we won't understand the stories. We will have concepts and ideas of the stories that we have been given, usually, or that we have thought ourselves. But usually what we think ourselves comes out of something that's been given to us through suggestion of an idea, through a parent, through a grandparent, through a church, or through some avenue that has imparted a thought to us, and we grasp it and latch onto it, sometimes not even noticing that we do. But Beverly said something in her song, or after the song, about my truth. That's my truth, that's where I am. And so I wrote this, actually I just wrote this a month or so ago. And this was the newsletter that went out in the monthly CD. And I wanted to read it to you this morning. Let's see here. Let me, well, I'll just go ahead and read it to you since I've got it out. You can go ahead and turn your Bible to Genesis chapter 2. You know this, but we'll look at it either way. Genesis chapter 2, and I am drawing off something that Pontius Pilate said to Jesus in the book of John. And so I quote it in this little letter here, I believe. Yeah, okay. Making a choice, religion or spiritual truth. And the reason I apply the term spiritual truth to truth is all truth is not truth. It can be a concept of what appears to be true. But many times the natural, because things constantly change, I mean, in the physical world today may not be exactly the way yesterday was, and probably won't be the way tomorrow will be. So there's that constant flux and flow. So it would be hard to establish truth based in flux and flow, because when I would personally think of the word truth, I would try to think of something that's solid or non-changeable. So I add a word to that, spiritual truth. And when I use that word spiritual, then I'm using it as a term to convey God. God is spirit, right? That's what the scripture says. So if I'm saying spirit, I'm saying God or universe or consciousness, essence, energy, goodness. Just go on and on and on down the list of whatever fits the universe. That's a good word. That's true. Because, and I'll say this, I mean, a preference to that with this statement also. The sun and its journey as a part of the universal truth, i.e. spiritual truth, it never deviates from its path. It never has risen in the south. And it never will. That's truth. That's solid, non-negotiable. It is. It always will rise in the east, and it will always set in the west. And it's done it for millions, probably billions of years. So when I'm talking spiritual truth, that's what I'm referring to. I'm talking about, and so my understanding of truth, if I'm seeking, like Pilate said, well, what is the truth? If I'm seeking for truth, then I would look at the scripture from an astrological point of view, or a universal point of view. So if I look at the scripture from an astrological, universal point of view, I have to look at it through the eyes of mythology, allegory, and symbol.
Well, that would be like, you're talking truth. Wayne talked about one of his mentors. He asked him, what is real?
Yeah.
That which never changes is what's real. That which never changes is spiritual truth.
Yeah.
The rest of it's going to change. This earth, even though it's flowing in the same path, it's not what it was.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say I'm coining the term spiritual truth. I probably have read that, maybe, I'm not sure, but I am coining that term spiritual truth as a non-negotiable truth. Period. It's non-negotiable. Just like I'm using the sun as an allegory. The sun, the stars, the galaxy, the universe. So I'm using that as it's non-negotiable. You can argue with it, but it will always be consistent as to what it is.
So it is what it is.
It is what it is, period. That's why God is. So it's truth, spiritual truth. So here's what I wrote. I said, what is the difference between religion and spiritual truth? Religion is about conquering and controlling an individual through teaching them what to think rather than how to think. Religion does this by instructing. This is what we believe. That's the instructions religion offers you. This is what we believe to be true, or the truth, otherwise known as doctrines and dogma. So if you are a Catholic, you believe Catholic dogma or Catholic doctrine. If you're a Baptist, you believe Baptist, and so forth. And you know that's the truth. Just ask them. Generally, Americans describe our nation as a Christian nation, when in fact our country was formed to be a godly nation, in other words, under God, or in God we trust. If anyone is bold enough or brave enough or open enough to do the research, he or she will find that many of the beliefs we have been taught from our Christian forefathers could be anything but the truth. We have been taught that what our local pastor or visiting missionary or the TV preacher tells us is the truth, when in fact it could be a fabrication which has been propagated for hundreds of years. I would just add a little side note to my own thing there is, I would say that just about every case that would be the truth. It is something they have propagated. And if we go back far enough, we will realize where the twist or where the falsehood was introduced. And that's hard on our psyche to think that, because we have a lot of these people held in high esteem. You have to understand, I'm not talking about the integrity or the character of anybody. I have been deceived, and I know you have been deceived. I have been deceived, and with all of my life, and or even stake my life on something I thought was true and found out it was not. Now
That's right.
that's disappointing. That's disappointing for anybody. I understand that. I do understand that. But to face up to that and be honest enough with myself, or I can deceive myself and then swallow the lie and call it the truth. And that's what we do. We do it many times. So, what is the truth? This is the question Pontius Pilate asked Jesus in John 18:38. And also the question we should ask ourselves on a constant, or at least on a consistent basis. The word truth defined in the dictionary is conformity to fact or reality, correct opinion, straight, right, something fixed or established. So, according to truth by the dictionary, it could be your opinion, and you call that the truth. Something we get plenty of from the political candidates. I want to use a term to talk about truth, which is spiritual truth. What is spiritual truth? Where is it? How can it be found? According to the ancient teachings, spiritual truth is known as perennial philosophy. I use that word perennial philosophy to just simply say that it's the wisdom that's in nature. When I talk about nature, I'm not just talking about the birds and the bees and the trees and what you see in the earth. I'm talking about the natural phenomenon of the movement of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars. That's what I'm talking about when I say nature wisdom. The wisdom that you see, that you can follow, the sun, the moon, the stars, the planetary systems. That's what I'm referring to. That's a wisdom that's known as nature wisdom. This wisdom is found in nature and it's all around us continually. This wisdom is a transforming power that all humanity innately longs and seeks for. This spiritual truth enables all persons to realize and assess the true sense of their own being. Religion does not offer this, even though it claims to offer the truth. There is a much brighter picture than politics, or religion has painted and continues to paint for us to be found in the genuine spiritual truth. Spiritual truth is about teaching you how to think for yourself. Coming back to personal responsibility. How to think for yourself. Thereby it instructs you how to develop your own innate abilities. Now that's what the truth is about. It's showing you how to develop your ability. I was going to say there's more of those chairs. You like those little chairs? Good. Okay, you can slide that table out and she can sit over there on with you. And you'll both have the same. All right, let me read. Spiritual truth is about teaching you how to think for yourself, thereby instructing you in how to develop your own innate abilities and capacities for understanding true wisdom. Learning how to think will aid and support your personal growth and your development. Learning how to think for yourself will also aid in your personal healing, physical, and especially psychologically, as you find yourself taking more responsibility for you and all that touches your world. So if you become a Netflixaholic, it's okay. Or if your space in the behind the steering wheel is neutral, it's okay. Until you are able to see something higher. So you have to understand it's for freedom you've been set free. And that, you know, if ever we could learn the truth about the Sabbath. The Hebrew word the Sabbath. The Hebrew word actually means peace and freedom. That's the capstone. If I've got my stick man on the board and I'm going to the 7 yoms or the 7 days of creation, and I put the capstone on the cerebrum or the upper brain, or I'll call it the mind of God or the Christ mind, the mind, period. I would say the mind is established in the Sabbath. Peace and freedom. Now that's a difficult pill to swallow because it hadn't got anything to do with the day of the week. As long as you can nail it down to a day of the week and you go and you try to do homage on that day of the week, you think you did something serviceable to God. And you didn't. You could do that every day of the week. That's one of the reasons Paul said, there is no such day as any special holy day. He said every day is a special holy day. So there you go. One of the first steps we must take on the path to spiritual truth is that of becoming open to new or different ways of thinking about our own personal core beliefs. How many of you have ever said that? How many of you have ever been taught that? I've had a lot of people say that to me, well, you have to have core beliefs. Well, I do have core knowings. I do have things within my gut that I know that they begin to be the core or the foundation, the sunum bonum of who I am. But not a belief. I had rather keep a belief in a loose leaf binder, and therefore I can take it out anytime I want to and get rid of it if I want to and discard it. Simply because a belief is just a box that you're in. God's not in that box other than God's in it with you. But God's not limited by that box, by the limitations of, well, this is what we believe. To be open is also to learn to trust that the path will lead and expose us to broader and deeper understanding of wisdom or spiritual truth. Choosing to become open also tends to unshackle your mind from dogma and doctrines which hold your attention and discourage you from peeking outside your box or your boundaries. Openness equals liberty to trust the God voice of spiritual truth that's born within every human being. True wisdom is the principal thing. Above all, seek for it and become wise, and with all of your getting, get understanding. That's Proverbs 4:7. So I read all of that because I wanted to share, or I am sharing, is teaching on symbols and the symbolic. And that I'm just simply saying that I wanted to try to take the Hebrew symbols, that's what they are, glyphs, are symbols that were dumbed down into words and put into a text. But if you go back far enough, and all you look at is a Hebrew Bible, or the Hebrew Torah, which I have one, you will realize that it is a succession of Hebrew glyphs. I think there's like 256,000, I forget exactly the number, 256,000 individual characters that have been chopped up in different points and places to say, here's what this word means, i.e., in the beginning is the chopped up group of Hebrew characters known as Barashit. And that Hebrew glyph, Barashit, you take those glyphs, Beth, Rash, Aleph, Shin, Tov, you take those glyphs and you chop them up into that particular word. Individually, they have much more powerful meaning through the symbol of it than you do by taking it and making a word out of it. Because all you get out of that is in the beginning. And if that's all you get is in the beginning, that can be controversial. You can say, whose beginning? What beginning? Where beginning? All these kinds of things. If you understand spiritual truth, there is no beginning and there is no end. Simply because is not God eternal without time, days, beginnings, and endings? Is it? Yeah. I think maybe so. Well, that's what you live and move and have your being by. If it wasn't for that eternal aspect that's not limited to time, or in other words, beginnings and endings. So if I were to take that glyph and I broke it down individually by the characters, and I begin to look at it individually by the characters, it would explode within me in a different definition. So I would say that set of glyphs, instead of saying in the beginning, I would say at my birthing. At that point where I come into the earth in this incarnation. And then I could begin to take off from there and get a completely different picture than you and I have been drawn. So if you take an ancient Hebrew, the Torah, take the Torah. We'll talk about the Torah some in a little bit. If you take the Torah and you look at it and you realize it's 256, I'm using that number, somebody correct me, I guess they can. And you realize that's just a solid row of successions of glyphs. And scientifically, they actually are studying that real. And today, and they get all kinds of stuff when they put that together in a computer and crunch it. All kinds of scientific material is available through that. It's endless. It's endless.
So in the beginning is in the beginning of me, or in the beginning of Connie. It's got nothing to do with anybody else.
Ain't got nothing to do with 6,000 years ago. It's at your birthing. At your birthing. And then what you have is you have the unfoldment of this design, Genesis 1, 2, and 3, which is the design, number one, Genesis 1 up to Genesis 2, 4, is the design of the 7 yoms. 7 actually then is the pattern or blueprint of a material creation known as a physical body. And we deducted it into this thing we call days because it's made out of in the night and the day. The night is the Hebrew word, what is that Hebrew word? It's right on the tip of my tongue. Let's see if I, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Actually, it means to fold back. And so the word to fold back is where, if I drew a DNA spiral, that's exactly what a DNA spiral stems from. And you got to realize your daddy and your mama mixed 2 DNAs together and come up with you. And that's what Genesis 1 is about. Here's the pattern, here's the blueprint, and then Genesis 2, 6, verse 6, 7, through the rest of the 3rd chapter is the material growth of that in the womb, or the temple of God, where God's building that. He gives a pattern for it, and then he says, okay, here's the pattern to construct it. It's just like I have a blueprint. Okay, here's my blueprint. I follow the blueprint, and boom, I get to build the building. And what do you have? Physical body. And I realize, I hope I'm not simplifying it, or I hope I'm not complicating it, but I realize it's hard to get it out of the realm of what we've been taught to think. Religion has taught us to think in a certain pattern, so it's hard to get out of that pattern. And I want to show you something about the patterns of religion and how it constantly draws us back into its deception, seduction. It seduces us, pulls us back. And we don't recognize it. Hardly ever do we recognize it. Genesis chapter 2, verse 9. I just want to look at a word, a glip. I'll put the glip on the board here in just a moment. So, Hebrew word, okay, it says, and out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree, verse 9, Genesis chapter 2, Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9, Genesis chapter 2, I'm sorry. Genesis chapter 2, verse 9, out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that's pleasant to the sight, good for food, the tree of life, that's che, that's the Hebrew word che, in the middle of the garden, the tree of knowledge, good, that's tov, T-O-W-B, tov in Hebrew, and ra. Now I'll put that glip up here. Let me put that glip ra because it's very important. And this is where we have been given this Hebrew glip. This is rash, and this is ayin. So you can rash and ayin. So you could say R-A. Now that's spelling backwards. So here's how we would do it: R-A. Ra. Now then, that's the tree ra. If I said ra, if I'm up here and I'm drawing my stick man, and I divide your brain into right and left, or I divide your brain into male and female. Have you had a red flag fly yet? Have you had a red flag fly? If I said right and left, did the red flag fly? If I said male and female, did a red flag fly? No. If I said evil, did a red flag fly? Automatically it did, and you didn't even recognize it. Automatically, you know what happened when I said evil? Automatically, these babies right here, automatically, you know what they thought?
Bad.
Bad. Automatically. Why? Why did you think that way automatically? You may tell you why? Because for 2,000 years you've been taught to think that way by a religious institution that doesn't have your better well-being in mind. It only has in mind to control you. Because number one, you are evil, and you are a sinner, you're going to hell, and you can't think. I've got to teach you how. So it has suppressed me for 2,000 years. But you didn't think bad when I said right. You didn't think bad if I said male at all. But if I said ra and tov, right and left, then it's hard for you to start to simulate that. So now I want to show you something about this Hebrew glib, ra.
And
So
just as you were saying that about saying that they were evil and all this, and that they were going to hell and all this, I seen those two over there look at one another. So that right there already shows that they have put fear into a child, because they looked at one another with big eyes when you said that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who does that? Mostly the parents. Many times the grandparents. But they hear it. It's like they used to when we were just packed out with kids. I mean, we had them everywhere. They'd be sitting on the back row. I had a slew of grandbabies, their age. And I'm up here preaching my heart out. And these kids back here, they sometimes rowdy, sometimes this, and sometimes, you make them shut up, sit on their nursery, blah, 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 blah. They have the ability at that age to double task. In other words, they can do something and hear something and pick it up and And these kids was picking it up. They would get it. Even though they sat back there talking or cutting up, and sometimes I would get on to, Austin, you get up here on the front row. I mean, I would do it just in preaching. I wouldn't pay attention to them. I would just say, up here. They have that ability, and they do pick up things like that. And if it's important for us, if we can learn to teach them, there is nothing to be afraid of. And if we try to redefine this word by its original definition, do you know what they would call me? A heretic. I'm in error. Why? Because I'm trying to give you the true meaning of this word from its holy characters, which are the glyphs, the ra, and the tov. You have to understand any word that starts out with a rash, number one, that word has godly character about it. If I were to tell you how to say the word spirit in Hebrew, I would start out with that glyph, ruach. Most people know that. Starts out with the rash. If I'm talking about redemption, restoration, again, I will start out with this word. There's nothing. If I take this word, ayin, this is the eye of God. This word, in its glyph, or holy character, it has to do with how God sees through you. So if I take that glyph, rash, ayin, and I begin to look at it from its true value, its spiritual truth, not from what they told you, not from a word they defined it. You see what I'm saying? Turn with me to Genesis chapter 38. I'm talking about symbols and the symbolic. That's a symbol. This rash, this Hebrew glyph, it's a symbol. What is a symbol? A symbol is a sign. It's a pointer. What is it doing? It's pointing to something. It's pointing to that is truth. If I I learn to follow the signs will take me on a path. How many of you have ever tried to follow the sign of the rainbow? Because at the end of the rainbow is what?
A pot of gold.
A pot of gold. Go with me to Genesis chapter 38. Now I'm just going to use the Hebrew word, so that when I read a word here that is this Hebrew glyph ra, I'm just going to read it that way, okay? Genesis chapter 38, verse 12. It says, "And in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up into his sheep shearers to Timnath, he and his ra."
Friend.
He and his ra. Oh, now why don't I stay with the word that we read in Genesis chapter 2? Why don't I say evil there? Do you think your friend is evil? If he is, he's not your friend. That word's right there, friend. It's the Hebrew word ra. Same identical word, same identical characters. That you see, if you see that and you realize the rash stands for spirit, you realize the ayin stands for the eye, you realize the Spirit of God is your friend. I hope you do. I pray that you can realize that. Just turn backwards a few pages to Exodus 32. Exodus 32. Let's see. Look at verse... That's not really where I want you to go. I want you to go to I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. I'm in Genesis. Let me get over here to Exodus. That helps when you get the right book going. Okay. 32. Exodus 38. It's moved on me. I'm sorry, it moved around on me. Where did that, here we go. Exodus 20, I'm sorry. Exodus 20. Find that place with me, and I want you to see this word. Exodus, and you've all heard this because this one is stuck out on a plaque in the front of many, many people's yards. They do it every 4 years at election time. A lot of people will stick this out in their yard, and they call it the 10 Commandments. So, Exodus chapter 20, look at verse 17. Now, this is the 10th commandment, by the way. So, I mean, you got to say this is holy. This is the 10th commandment. Verse 17, Exodus 20, verse 17. Thou shalt not covet thy raw's house. Thou shalt not covet thy raw house. Thou shalt not covet thy raw wife, nor his manservants, nor his maidservants, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is your raw's. Now, why didn't they use evil right there in the 10th commandment? Why didn't they do that? I mean, I think that's very, very valid. I would love for some Hebrew scholar or some church forefather that has got credentials and all of these other things to explain to me why they didn't stay with this glib, because this is the glib that's used right here, raw. And we can go all the way through the Old Testament and you will see this exact same thing, this constant over and over abuse and misuse of a Hebrew glib or a Hebrew symbol. And that symbol, of course, is raw. Now, if I break it down like this and I show you the rash, the first one, this one right here, has a number value of 200. And that the value of 200 puts it into cosmic, or you could say spiritual reality. In Hebrew, you have a succession of glyphs that go 1 through 9, which are single digits. And then you have a succession that goes 10 through 90, which are dual or double. And then you have glyphs that goes through 10 through 900, which are triple. So you go from single, this is from a divine, from nothing, into duality, or what we would call separation, which is not duality. Actually, it's two that appears to be, that's really one. And that's what these glyphs, these Hebrew glyphs.
So that's the soul, dealing with the soul, right?
Yeah, this deals with the duality, just deals with the physical manifestation, the physical body. And the reason it deals with the physical body is because there are two aspects of it. What's the two aspects of this? The eternal and the temporal, the timeless and the time. That's a conundrum. And so when you look at all of these glyphs that deal with duality, they are conundrums. And so if we begin to try to build a doctrine or a dogma in duality and say, well, it's a misunderstanding of the glyph or the sign. That's why you take this sign and you put a word with it like neighbor, or you put a word with it like evil. The word communicates an idea and a concept. But this glyph right here is designed to do that, communicate a concept, an idea. But when we add the wrong words to it, like evil, that's the wrong word. It should be right, not evil. Right is not wrong. It's just right. Left is not wrong. It's just left. So when you take the glyphs, the Hebrew glyphs, and you start to look at them in this light, they begin to take on a different meaning. The sign gets clearer. Again, the challenge is open. Open to think out of the box I'm programmed in. So that's the challenge, is open to think. This rash can be used for so many different words, and I just got through showing you some of them. It's used for the word friend. It's used for the word companion. It's used for the word thought. Right brain. Where do your thoughts come from?
From your brain.
Bingo. That's this Hebrew glyph. This is what's behind this particular glyph. It's also used for the word resurrection, which I just named. It's the word for spirit, which I just named. It also it's used under this glyph. I told you the Hebrew word ruach. And the Hebrew word ruach actually is referring to the connection of the pineal gland. The pineal gland, and the pineal gland looks like this. It's just a little bitty, it has this. It connects to your, if I brought my brain that I have from the neurologist, if I brought my brain, you can see that sandwiched right between the left and the right hemisphere of the brain, right here in the front, is this little bitty gland. It's called the pineal gland. And this pineal gland has two legs, and this is where our letter R comes from. So when you're talking about resurrection, and you're referring to the pineal gland through the ruach, then what you're talking about is opening your third eye. So when you open your third eye, now you begin to ayin, that's the Hebrew word, or the Hebrew glyph, ayin, actually means to see the way God sees. But the way God sees is through you. But you know what? You can interpret it. And if you interpret it different than how God saw it, guess what? God measures it to you the way you interpret it. It's not necessarily the way that God says this is how it can be. You can do this. It's how you begin to interpret your situation. So therefore, words are powerful because you give words and you create things.
Did you say that was also the tree of life?
This is the tree of life.
Yes,
It is.
in the center of the garden.
And then when you look at that Y-looking thing there, it kind of looks like a branch.
This is the tree. This is the tree right here. Right there's the tree. That's the trunk of the tree. These are the glands of the tree, the 7 yomes of creation. That's the tree. That's the crowning glory of the tree.
So
The tree of the knowledge of right and left.
When you look at that Y and that 7, it looks like a Y and a 7 to me. Okay, you got your Y
Backwards
there.
7.
Yeah.
That's looks to me like that's branches from a tree, and then you got your spirit there, which is your 200. Your spirit going into the branches, so the tree of life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how my brain thinks.
The Hebrew glyphs are once you begin to start to see them, they're not that complicated. If you don't see them, they get a little complicated because you have the dalit, which is the number 4, and it does look just about like a 7. It has this little lip that comes over the edge. The rash it curves here. It has this curve. The dalit is a 7, and this is a 4. I'm sorry. The dalit is number 4, and actually it means a door.
I can see that as being a door.
Yeah. So then you have this glyph. All of these and more come under this particular glyph. So when you see this sign, if you can learn to think, when you see this glyph, this sign, if you can learn to think with this idea, You understand what I'm saying? You can't look at it and say, oh, it's evil, it's bad. You see, the whole idea that we have, and we haven't realized it, we haven't recognized, and we still don't realize and don't recognize the depth that religion has sunk us to. It's pulled us, it's put its noose around us, and we don't recognize it. And that's so hard. The way to begin to recognize it is open your mind. With an open mind, you begin to see, you begin to think. So, and then we come to this glip, the ayin, again, holy character, number 70. And let me show you something about this character, because it has 200, 2. This is the Beth, or the Hebrew Ba'ith. This glip looks like this. Beth, or Ba'ith. Veth, you can say it two different ways. You can say it with a B sound, or you can say it with a V. Either way. Both ways. B or V. Beth or Veth. Va'ith. And so when you talk about Beth, this glip right here equals number 2. That means that it has to do with materiality, manifestation. House. You know, isn't that what we call it? When you say Beth, like B-E-T-H, what do you think of? Most people think, if you say Beth Hannah or Bethlehem or any of the Beth words, you think of house, right? And that's exactly what it means. House, that's what it's talking about. This is talking about container. So the word actually, Beth, actually equals the word, simplest word you can use is container. Is a tree a container? Yes. What is it a container? Well, you can say it's a container of sap, or you could say it's a container of life force. Is a dog a container? Yeah. Is a human being a container? Yes.
That's how I associate it with us, is the upper and the lower there's 2, like the upper and the lower. So that's where Beth, which that symbol there looks like a front porch, an overhanging, and it's porch that you stand on that's attached to a house. So that's how, when I look at that, I remember that is always Beth, because it looks like a porch.
That's right. That's how the glip is supposed to be. And the way they get the glips, the way that they were supposedly got the glips is, now, this is a mythology, it's a fabulous story. I'm not sure that there's a tremendous amount of truth in it. It could be, is they took a caduceus, and they stuck the caduceus in the ground. They stuck the caduceus in the ground, and every time the sun dial, the caduceus is the dial, and every time the sun moved up on its notch, it would project a shadow from the caduceus. The caduceus is the symbol of the life force. So that the sun, through the shadow, would project, and that's what it would project. These were the symbols of the sun energy, life force. So that when you see these glips, then you begin to connect them to the definition or the meanings of their life force. You follow that?
Yes.
And I realize that it probably, when you first look at it, you think, whoa, that's awful complicated. Really, it's not. It's really not. Once you realize it's natural. It's just natural. It's normal. So when you see the ayin 70, well, I'll back up here. Let me back up to the glip, the Beth. The reason I'm coming back to this, Beth, container, house, it means place of birthing. The house is the place of birthing. So what is your physical body? It is the temple. It's the house. It's the tabernacle God lives in. It's the place God births through. And so God, as energy, force, power, creativity, God uses the vehicle of the physical body to birth all kinds of stuff in the earth. Much of it's chaotic. Is it the power's fault? Or is it anybody? It's not a matter of fault. It's a matter of energy flowing through a certain channel. And if the channel is designed to give it a certain twist or a certain swirl, it'll manifest that way. And guess what? You and I, we are the ones that that design the channel it flows through. So if it flowing through me, and I'm creating a lot of corrupt, wicked, bad, trying to stay away from using the word evil, but that's how you would use that word. It wasn't God. God created evil, right? Isaiah 43. He created light. He created evil. If you got to sit and think about it, that's not bad. Evil has to be bad, Brother Lynn. Maybe our usage of it is. Yeah, maybe the way we have been taught to use it. But maybe if I'm using it this way, if I'm using it like it's originally intended through these glyphs, you've got to realize what I'm saying is about your neighbor. I'm not saying something bad about your neighbor. I'm not saying your neighbor is evil. You follow what I'm saying? You got that? Yeah, I'm not saying. You know, this word actually can also be used as your lover. And I hope that you don't think your lover is evil. Pun intended. You can laugh. Also, it's intuitive. So I hope you don't think that it also is thought. Again, thought. Thought. Right brain. Where does thought come from? It comes from the light, the entrance of thy word. The entrance of thy word, thy thought brings light. So when I take this Hebrew glyph Beth, house of birthing, creativity, and then I add the double zero to it, then I give it that eternal aspect. So now it has cosmic or spiritual aspect about it. Then when I come down to the word, or the glyph Ayin 70, 7 is referring to completion or totality. And then I add the other zero, I put it in the physical dimension. So now the Ayin is in the physical. That's why you have two eyes on your body instead of one. Because of the two glyphs and the duality. Represents not duality. And how many of you ever seen somebody that call them gouch-eyed?
What?
Gouch-eyed?
No.
Cross-eyed. Cross-eyed. You've seen them. Cross-eyed, gouch-eyed. You know, and you look at them, you're trying to figure out which one am I looking at? Which way do I look at?
Yes, when I don't wear my glasses, I get that way.
And that's okay. Yeah. So, okay, let me move on here. I've gotten really hung up here with this further than I wanted to. Anyway, y'all get the idea? You get the drift that I'm saying is that if you read the Bible at face value, and you read all of these, in other words, if you read the 10 Commandments at face value, you would look at it and you would say that your neighbor, and you wouldn't call your neighbor evil in this comparison right here, but it's the same exact Hebrew word, ra. Same glyph. And, you know, of course, you can look it up in your own. I do encourage people to look it up in their own dictionary or whatever they can get. If you can get a Hebrew concordance or a Hebrew Bible, look at it for yourself and you see, oh, okay, wow, I wonder why they did that. Okay. Hebrews, go with me to the book of Hebrews, chapter 8. Let's jump over there real quick so I can get on past this. Hebrews chapter 8. And y'all know this one, or I know you know this one, you can quote it, Hebrews chapter 8. Everybody can quote this one. Hebrews chapter 8. He says, verse 10, Hebrews chapter 8, verse 10 says, "For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws," everybody say laws.
Laws.
In Hebrew, that's the word Torah. And the word in Hebrew, Torah, actually means precepts. And if you can get this, precepts are truths. So, if that's the truth, where's the truth at? Let's read it again. Verse 10. "For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws," truth, where?
in their minds.
I will put it in their mind and write it in their heart. You hear that? So where is the truth at? If you're looking for it in a book, or if you're looking for it in a religion, or if you're looking for it outside you, you probably won't find it. Why? Because it's in your heart. It's already there. It's that's within you, that if you get attuned to it, you begin to fine-tune your thinking to it, you'll recognize it constantly all the time. I do. I'm beginning to do it more and more. I'm beginning to look and listen and see people who I highly respect. I love them, and all of a sudden I start to see some things they're saying, and I realize, oh, that they don't even realize that. I didn't even realize that. That has its root in religion 1,800 years ago or 1,700 years ago. And we don't even notice. We say things and don't even pay attention and don't even recognize some of the things that we say because of the way we've been taught to think from religious perspectives. I want to read you something from my favorite author, Alvin Boyd Kuhn. This is called The Shadow of the Third Century. Phenomenal book. Phenomenal book. And I want to read you some things out of this book. Page 61 in this book, if y'all had your Alvin Boyd Kuhn Bible. Bottom paragraph, it says, "But there will be no profit in the study of ancient religious books. They simply will not yield their meaning until their construction on a basis determined by the esoteric principle." Everybody say esoteric?
Esoteric.
I had a guy that sent me a Facebook or an email, I'm not sure which one it was, and he said he was condemning the fact that I was saying or using the term esoteric. And I thought, wow, how shallow-minded or how far off could anybody be? If it's simple, anybody can look up the word esoteric. Actually, this means inward. And it deals with truth that's inward. And what did we just read in Hebrews? Hebrews said the truth is in you. That would be esoteric. So if I learn to go esoteric, that means within. That means to seek within your being. In other words, the truth is hid esoterically, or in other words, it's hid within these symbols. So how am I going to find what these symbols, the glyph of Ra, if I don't go in it? And if I go in it, then I've got to find the Hebrew definition of it. That's how I would define any word, in Hebrew especially. So again, let me read this to you. "There will be no profit in the study of ancient religious books. They simply will not yield their meaning until their construction on a basis determined by esoteric principles is given full consideration in its rendering. Esotericism imposed a peculiar methodology upon the writing of all religious books, and to attempt to interpret them without reference to the specifications of this methodology is to ensure gross error." Selah. I resound a huge yes, amen. And that's what we've had have happen to us for 2,000 years because of a lack of understanding. These books were not a history. They were a mystery about the physical body, the house of God. And they were written in esoteric fashion. So if these books are esoteric, then I've got to know how and learn how to go within them to find their true meaning. Let me read you something else that he said here. And actually, all he's doing here is he's quoting from this guy, Godfrey Higgins, the Anaclypsis. Oh, how it does that?
When you bent down, I guess you...
I did it. So here, Alvin Boyd Kuhn is quoting from Godfrey Higgins. This is called the Anaclypsis, and this book was written in 1832. Let me see here. 1836. This book was written in 1836. This is just only half of it. There's actually 2 volumes of this book. He wrote this and this is called the Anaclypsis. It's an attempt to draw aside the veil. That's what I'm doing here. I'm pulling the veil back It's an attempt to draw aside the veil of the Saitic Isis, or an inquiry into the origin of languages, nations, and religions. It's a powerful little book right here. So here, and I'll read you, I want to read you a quote from that book. He says, after, this is from Godfrey Higgins, this is Anaclipsis, and this is on page 616 of this book. This particular volume, there's 2 volumes of this. This one's got about 800 pages in it, I think. Let's see, 844 on that book. This is on page 616 in that book of the Anaclipsis. It says, after giving the subject all the consideration in my power and a diligent examination of ancient documents for many years, I have become quite convinced that almost all the ancient histories were written for the sole purpose of recording a myth, which it was desired to transmit to posterity, but yet to conceal from all but the initiated. And did you hear what that said? That said that it's written in a mythos because it's hidden mysteries. And it's hidden, many of them, they use this term, they use the term gross, talking about the masses, or they use another term, let's see, I don't know if he used it. Were written the sole purpose of recording the mythos, which is desired to transmit to posterity, yet to conceal from all but the initiates. Initiation into truth would be just like what you're doing here. It's where you have submitted yourself to open your mind, to think out of the norm, or to think out of the box that you've been traditionally put in. So, the traditions of the countries were made subservient to this purpose without any suspicion of fraud, and we only give them the appearance of fraud when we confound them with history. This is the case with all early histories. They were all anciently composed, or if written, they were written in verse for the sake of correct retention by the memory and set to music for the same reason. They were all the same nature as the Iliad and the Aeneid. The most ancient of the ancients had nothing of nature or real history. Real history was not the object of their writing. And then he says this, I'll close here in just a second with the, says almost every part of Genesis is enigmatically a parable. The system of concealment and of teaching by parable is the most marked characteristic of any spiritual teaching. I suspect that there is not a sentence in Genesis which is not consistent with good sense if its true meaning could be discovered. I would agree completely. Not a sentence that's not consistent with simple reasoning. So a talking snake is not reasonable, folks. It just don't do it. A tree that has an apple in it that when you eat it will condemn you forever. Oh, no, back up. Let me back up. You hadn't even eaten that tree. She did, and because she did, you catch the rub for it. That doesn't make good sense. So I totally agree with Godfrey Higgins here. He says, I feel little doubt that such a passage as that of God wounding Jacob in the thigh and his failing in his endeavor to kill Moses. Did y'all know that after God told Moses to go down there, God hid out and his intention was to kill him? He was going to kill Moses. Most people don't even know that. It's in your Bible in Exodus. Are completely, are wholly misunderstood. And I would agree. The Genesis was considered by most, if not all, of the ancient Jewish philosophers and the Christian fathers as allegory only. Not one shred of history about it. So, you know, when you read stuff like that, you go on and on and on, and you get on a quest for spiritual truth would just literally just smack you right in the face, and you say, oh, okay, that's what that means. That's what that was saying. That's what it was talking about. And then it makes common sense. It's not hard or it's not difficult. And so there is a constant teaching with this glip, and I am trying my best to get to it. It seems to be awful difficult to get here, but I'm trying to get here, and that's this glip right here. I'll throw that one away. That's this glip right here as we close. Yod Hey Vav Hey. Yod Hey Vav Hey. And so this glip has gotten so much misunderstanding. I mean, so much abuse. And of course, we put a name to that. When I put the name to Yod Hey Vav Hey, Yahweh, Jehovah. And immediately, when I put those names to it, English names to that glip, your thought went one way, and this glip went the other way. You went in totally two different directions. Just exactly when I read evil for Ra, or neighbor for Ra, or lover for Ra, or thought for Ra. You see what I'm saying? So to come back and to truly understand this glip and break it down and begin to see what the glip is about, just like breaking this one down, Ra, it really begins to put a different perspective on it. So we will just stop there and start there, hopefully next Sunday.
Very good.